Heyo and welcome to another episode of Pine Harbor County, where we will use and abuse the new operating district mechanic that was introduced in Cities Skylines 2. In the last episode, we extended our capital city of Bunyan's Rest into the Inner Bay area with a commercial tourism pier, transit, signature buildings, and much, much more. So if you happened to miss the last episode, then be sure to click on the info card above, or if you are looking for a new Cities Skylines 2 series to binge watch, then check out the entire Pine Harbor County playlist in the description below. Now, you may have noticed a slight change with where our signature buildings are. That is right, I did actually decide to switch the locations of the Watanabe Tower and the Century Castle. I did this mainly because the height was wrong. The Watanabe Tower was way too tall for the zoning assets in this area of Bunyan's Rest. Meanwhile, it did look perfect in the interchange, and the Century Castle looked good in kind of both locations. So I made a small change there that I think kind of elevated the skyline's appeal and kind of helped with the tapering to be a little bit more even. Before we jump into today's episode, we are coming up on our 50th episode, which means another viewer suggested video. I have been keeping an eye out on the comments and have compiled the suggestions for our poll. So after today's episode, be sure to jump on over to the community tab and vote for your favorite suggestions between now and October 14th. The top 2 winners will be built in our 50th episode, airing on October 24th. Okay, now that we have our announcements out of the way, let's talk about today's build. Today we will continue to extend the Inner Bay area of Bunyan's Rest with a decorated sandy beach, commercial strip, services, and finalize the extensions of the yellow and red subway lines. So with all that on our plate today, let's jump right on into it. So the first thing I wish to do today is lay out our roads so we have a general idea of where we're going to build. Since this area is going to be a little bit more on the lower rise residential and commercial assets, I also wanted to add in some sound barriers to the highway to help reduce the noise a bit. So let's jump on into a time lapse and see what we can create with our road tools. Oh my goodness, I could absolutely go crazy with that grid tool. Anywho, let's start getting our beachside area in first, and to start this, I'm going to come in with the sandy surface one and draw in just a thin area of beach, as I do not want this to be a very big area. Just a small beachside of sorts. I am drawing inspiration from a beach in New England for this, as it has maybe about 1 mile, about 1.6 kilometers of actual sand to lounge on, and the rest is just rocky cliffside. It's a beautiful area, but taught me that you don't need this huge Californian coastline to have a small section of beach. So, rambling aside, let's jump into a time lapse and draw in our sandy surface one. And now I want to use the area between the sand and the road to add in some commercial food stands and trucks before we taper into actual zoning. So let's get our surface tile, I think 2 for this one. Yep, 2. And let's draw this in. I am choosing the surface tile 2 because it is beige in color, and I think that will blend with the sand nicely. So let's fill in this area right in here with some tile. Sweet, now let's get our props in there. I'm going to use the chairs from the residential tab, and as I mentioned earlier, the food trucks and carts from the commercial tab to decorate this area in a bit. So let's jump into a beautifying the build time lapse and breathe in some detail to this area. Now that we have given this area some detail, let's give it some life in the form of commercial zoning assets. I'm not going to be particularly picky about which assets spawn in, but I am going to be particular about where we zone them. I want to have just a small strip facing the beach, which I imagine would have fried food, some trinket shops, and a restaurant for the beach visitors. I'm also probably going to just add in a little commercial here and here to generate some pedestrian traffic along this side of Foggy Street. Now, around this area, I want to add small waterfront housings, so I am going to keep these assets tiny and try to spawn them in the 2x2 squares. We do not have any residential demand at this time because very little time has actually elapsed in the game since the launch of the homeless patch, but I want the zoning in place as I have noticed we will get a bit of demand here and there while we are building in another area. So let's get this in, and I think I'm going to be a bit unique and fill in the area with some sand prior to zoning so we have a sandy effect around the houses instead of a grassy texture. Next is adding in some needed services, and I'm planning on creating a unique fusion for our first service, communication. So up here near the lake, I want to add a server farm and a radio mast sort of fusion. This will help spread our communication coverage and also kind of just create a unique combination of these assets together. So let's jump on in and place those in. Next, we need a little more administration coverage in this area, so let's get a welfare office in, and I'm going to keep this one kind of closer to the roundabout we built several episodes back, as that's sort of the central location of the Inner Bay area. And I also want to fuse this with the post office, as honestly, I just really like how the two buildings melt together, and we could use a little bit more post office coverage in this area. So let's jump into the next time lapse. Let's get the welfare office in, a post office, and a couple of post mailboxes if need be. Alright, now let's jump into a beautifying the build time lapse and decorate this area up with some props, gardens, and surfaces. The last assets I want to add before we begin to spam in some zoning is transit extensions. I want to finalize the yellow and red lines in this area by adding 2 stations, one near our beach strip along the Inner Bay area, and then one more west to pick up the residents that will eventually grow in the area closer to the lake. So let's jump in and place down our stations and our tracks. Alright guys, real quick before we go drawing in our line extensions, quick public service announcement. I did add Anarchy to our list of mods, not because I actually plan on using Anarchy, but when I was placing the first subway station closer to the inner bay area, I kept running into bulldozing conflicts. Like, I could not delete anything. And it admittedly is very frustrating when that happens, especially when you're trying to record. So, I have added Anarchy. You can hold me accountable to not actually using it by keeping an eye on Chirper over here. If Chirper is, flaming eyes, that means Anarchy is on. If he is good old happy blue Chirper, that means he is not on. Okay, so with that said, like I said, Anarchy is just going to be there in case I need to delete something that can't get deleted for whatever reason. In the meantime, let's get back to our regular scheduled shenanigans. And let's draw in our red and our yellow lines. Finally, let's decorate the area in with a beautifying the build time lapse. And then stick around to the end of this time lapse to see the final yellow and red lines in action with a third-person transit ride.
you.
Alrighty everyone, I think that just about wraps up today's episode. If you enjoyed, please be sure to hit that like button below, and if you're looking for a new Cities Skylines 2 series to binge watch, then be sure to check out the entire Pine Harbor County playlist located in the description below. Or just be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when the next episode airs. Also, before you go, don't forget to jump over to the community tab and vote on your favorite viewer suggestions by October 14th for our upcoming 50th episode. Until next time, I hope everybody has a phenomenal week.